Whatever.
Okay.
Right, well, let's get into the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are we at tipping point with climate change? The environment editor of The Guardian, Damien Carrington, wrote in his review of 2022 that we are another mile on the highway to climate hell. Lois is laughing.
Was that really in The Guardian?
Yeah, it must be true.
Hell surprise.
Well, as usual, the current situation was described as a global crisis.
Oh, another one.
And it seems from his words that we'll be wiped out very soon if we don't take immediate action.
Fair point.
Maybe they go for him first. The Met Office has confirmed that 2022 was the hottest year on record for the UK by value of the average yearly temperatures. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are we at tipping point for climate change? Right, I'm joined now by Senior Lecturer in Sustainable Construction and Climate Change, John Grant. John, welcome. Well, listen, we're on a knife edge, that's what you're saying. We're at tipping point, we're going to hell in a handcart. What do you make? Because this is apparently the hottest year since records began. Why is that the case, and what are we using to measure it by?
Well, I mean, it's not a surprise that we've been talking about this for 30-odd years, and people have been laughing it off because obviously planetary systems, they take quite a while to change. But once they get moving, that momentum kind of continues as well. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that, you know, the laws of physics say that as you keep increasing the amount of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and the knock-on effects of water vapor and all of that, that we're experiencing a much warmer world. And you know, our summers going through. I mean, the most recent summer was sort of exemplified this. But not only the summer, you know, in November, although I think most of us have forgotten it because it was so cold in the latter part, you know, we were at 21 degrees on Remembrance Sunday in Wales, parts of Wales. It's very warm, but we've got this flickering effect as well, where we experience it really cold. Look at America, that's dragged down all of this Arctic air over it. And, you know, we could theoretically have a similar experience over here. This has all been predicted, and it's just, unfortunately, that you know, that statement from The Guardian is that, you know, we ignore this at our peril.
But I mean, so I mean, do you remember the summer before this one? I mean, that wasn't so great, was it? And obviously, the way, I mean, and some winters are hotter than others. I mean, how long have these records been going on for? Because I think if you look at the global, the Earth and the world as a larger thing, haven't we gone up through these peaks and troughs throughout existence of the planet?
Yeah.
Absolutely. The planet is always changing, and that is often given as a reason why we should ignore the current shift. But what you need to put into that is the speed of the change and previous extremes that we are aware of. So it was a little bit warmer in the medieval times around Europe, but not across the world. And the thing is that over the last 10,000 years or so, we have been relatively stable, about 1 degree warmer or 1 degree cooler than an average. Now, what we've got at the moment is that we're at 1.2, over 1.2 as an average, remember. So there are parts of the world that are significantly warmer and other parts that are cooler or stable. But this speed of change, it is this speed of change that we're experiencing that we really haven't seen in the geological record. And that's where, you know, the concern comes from the scientists. It's not that the world is changing. Yes, the world could change. It is the fact that we are pushing this with our accelerator firmly on that pedal going down this road, and we're doing it very rapidly. And that gives us a real challenge to adapt to this changing world, and you know, and this flickering of extreme heat and extreme
I think
cold
the word that you said there is adapt, isn't it? John, the word you said there is adapt. Yeah, is adapt to the change, not necessarily try and stop it, because I don't know how much power we really genuinely have to stop something that is changing, which would be changing anyway, but you're saying it's changing quicker than it would normally. And you also said, since previous records that we are aware of course, that is that we don't really have we don't really know, do we? And is climate actually something that you can realistically predict? Is the planet not something just like someone's mood? You can't really tell what it's going to do. There's a feedback to it. What you do might make it do something different. So with us changing the amount of CO2 and stuff might encourage something different, which could be worse. Is there any, in your modelling, is there anything that factors in if the planet doesn't do what we're expecting it to do?
Of course. I mean, these are people's entire lives spent studying the output of the sun, the position of the planet around that. We know what the background should be because we play these models backwards first before projecting them forwards to see whether they, when you run them, whether they get it right in the past. These are not, it's not just somebody sort of like going, oh, what? I think it's going to get a bit warmer because there's a bit more CO2 in there.
No, but nobody's saying that. But listen, you saw the modelling with COVID, right? Can I just, OK, John, just bring you back to the modelling for COVID. They did all the things that we're supposed to put in and did this, and it was way off. It was way off track. What if, is there any modelling that you've got in there that suggests what if it isn't CO2? Is there any other suggestions, or are we just pumping in one specific objective? Because there might be, just like with diesel, we thought, oh, you can't have diesel's wonderful, it's amazing. We hadn't worked out that nitrous oxide was an issue, and then we realised it later. So what I'm saying is, have we modelled it and tried other things that could be affecting the planet rather than just CO2?
Yes, and the scientists are publishing on that. And the problem is that the politicians, they want an easy solution. And I get why they want an easy solution. They want to say, right, well, what's the one thing? When I get put on shows like this, I often get asked, John, what's the one thing we can do to stop climate change? And there isn't one thing. The reason we are here is
so if there isn't one thing,
series of things, and the solution will be a whole series of responses too.
So one of them you're saying is to reduce CO2. What would another thing be then for climate change? What's the next?
We need to get a handle on the methane emissions that are spiking at the moment, and also get that feedback understood about how the ice is melting in both Antarctica, which is at a catastrophic loss at the moment, and the thinning of the ice in the Arctic, which we've been measuring now for decades, and it is a real concern that once I think you started this by talking about tipping points, and the idea is that the world wants to stay stable. I want it to stay stable.
But
you
why?
do. The people that are sitting either side of you do. But perhaps we could reach a point where we tip over that, and surely we have to play it safe.
But perhaps, just suppose it, that the Earth creates its own homeostasis, so its own balance. So just like if I said I'm going to go on a detox, which is not a detox, by the way, it's very bad for you, what your body does is then sort of tries to level everything out, and bring in different... What makes you think that the Earth is not creating its own homeostasis in another way? And by you putting something in, it's a bit like putting a valve in a heart when they do that, and then they've realised that actually it creates other issues because the body starts to help itself and sort of balance itself out. What makes you think that if we do that, we'll that we got the balance wrong?
Well, yes, it is without a doubt one of the most complex scientific strategies and investigations that we've ever undertaken. But as I said right at the beginning here, the Earth over the last 10,000 years has been extraordinarily stable. Prior to that, it's been warmer, colder, more CO2, less CO2. And it was very dynamic, and we know that. And what we could do is push ourselves out of this very stable situation because it is extraordinarily unlikely for us to be this stable for 10,000 years.
Well, listen, John, I'm running out of time.
And if we go out of it,
John, I'm running out of time. I could talk to you about this forever. We would never agree. But it's really, really good to talk to you.
Disagree. We're both
I do disagree.
I do disagree. It's whether you accept that we can be pushed out of this.
I think that the Earth itself could find its own balance. I suspect that what we could do could
whether humans can live in that new balance. That's my concern.
But maybe we're not meant to.
5 degrees warmer now.
But maybe we could never change it. John, look, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me. That is, of course, John Grant, who's a senior lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change from Sheffield Hallam University. Well, if you've just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue with our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are we at tipping point of climate change? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcast broadcaster and director of CAR26, Lois Perry, former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards, and also former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. But first, let's get your latest news headlines. Live on TV, online and on digital radio, we are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before the break, we were discussing whether, with regard to climate change, I was speaking to some experts. We returned to that great British debate, and I was asking, are we at the tipping point of climate change? Because, of course, there have been droughts. We've had the hosepipe ban, the hottest days on record, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It was so cold. I hate a bad summer. According to the Met Office earlier this year, to some of the coldest nights a few weeks ago. It seems we are, as The Guardian says, another mile on the highway to climate hell. That is what people are saying. But are we? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. Andy says, we are long past the tipping point for the climate. It is all downhill from now. All we can do is slow it down. But is there enough time? Doubtful, unless we get India, China and Russia on board right now. Stephen says climate change is happening and will continue regardless of what we do. The cycle has happened before. Climate alarmists are just making money out of foolishness. We're fools to be listening. Ben says year on year and more alarmism. Well, let's see what my panel think of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and director of CAR26, Lois Perry, former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards, and also former MP Stephen Pound. Lois Perry, I'm going to come straight to you. She was chomping at the bit as I was speaking to John Grant with regard to that.
There were so many things. I was actually... Did you see me pinching my hand to actually see it? Right, OK, so first of all, I'd like to say it's probably news to the hippopotamuses that lived in the Thames 10,000 years ago that it was the hottest summer on record last year. Secondly, it has been much warmer, not a little bit warmer, but much warmer during the Roman period and the medieval period, which that whole thing about it being really, stable for the last 10,000 years is complete nonsense. I do agree we're at a tipping point, but you know what that tipping point is? It's a tipping point of people using climate alarmism and CO2 stuff to actually control us, doing these zones where we can't leave our homes in 15-minute cities, getting us out of our cars, keeping us in our pods, keeping us controlled, stopping us flying, the plebs flying, like Boris Johnson's dad said recently. That's what we're at a tipping point of. We're at a tipping point of government having complete control over our lives, using CO2 and using climate alarmism as the reason for it. Because CO2 is life. It is life, which means if it's net zero CO2, then it means net zero life. It means you and me, all of us, in our pods, at home, on permanent lockdown.
Well, you pointed out, and I don't know how, I don't know much about this particular thing, but this Clintel.org thing where loads of people signed. I don't know how reputable the scientists are, but it is a different view. So I'm going to say what they said.
The guy who headed it up has won a Nobel Prize.
Well, OK, so this is a different view. So we've listened to John Grant, and I respect his opinion. But these guys are saying that what comes out with the modelling, the way the modelling has been done, so the computer models are human-made. So we've made the model, not us, obviously, we're not clever enough. And what comes out is fully dependent on what theoreticians and programmers have actually put in. So the hypotheses that they put in, the relationships, all the stability constraints, all the things that they've put in to come out with their conclusions. So unfortunately, it says here in mainstream climate science, most of this input is undeclared. So we don't know what the scientists are actually putting in to come out with the CO2. Now, I am not saying that climate change does not exist. I am saying that I just want to know more. I want the politics to be taken out of it, and I want straightforward answers, and I'm sick and tired of what feels like people making money. What do you think, Peter?
Well, I want to come back to what Lois said, because, I feel that's just a conspiracy theory. And
oh, no, that's just a way of shutting someone down.
No, hang on. That's what he thinks. He's entitled to that. Carry on.
OK, but the wording... No,
that's what he thinks.
I apologise.
Sorry, carry on.
It's all right. No need to apologise. We're all friendly. But, no, I think it's a conspiracy theory because I think one can have a view on climate change and we can disagree on that, and one can have a view on whether it's man-made and woman-made and man-made, and I happen to think that it is. But I don't know of any evidence that the government or any government wants to keep us locked in our house with climate change used as a pretext.
Well, the evidence is absolutely everywhere because everything that's being done to restrict our personal mobility is being done in the name of saving the planet. Like these zones in Oxford, have you heard about that? The 15-minute zones where you can't travel from one place to the other. You have to go all around the outside of the city, and it's being rolled out across the whole of the United Kingdom. And the climate change argument is being used as the excuse to keep us out of our cars at home. Do you know what? If you can't
let Peter respond to that, because you've had a bit, Peter. Please respond.
I'm happy to weigh my turn. So let's go to London, a city where I live and I know a bit more about. Within the last 5 years, we had air quality named on a child's death certificate for the first time.
Yeah.
Now, it's obviously, air quality now is a separate issue to climate change over the next 100 or 500 years. But if we're talking about cars and restrictions on personal mobility, I don't think there are any, by the way. But if we're talking about this in the context of restrictions, we now know, extremely sadly, that air quality has killed a child, and on average, for people in London, children's lungs are about 10% smaller. So there's an argument for 100 years' time, but there's also an argument about now.
But nobody would argue with air quality, and I've met Rosamond as well. She's an incredible woman, and she set up the Ella Foundation, and I absolutely agree that we need to improve the air quality. But there are different things we can do with regard to that.
I think
there's different fuels and things like that that don't actually give emissions and things like that. So we can focus on that.
Cars,
but all I'm thinking of is that the way this whole climate agenda is positioned seems to be costing me and you and everybody a fortune. And if you measure it up, electric cars right now, especially with their carbon footprint to make one, don't appear to be doing much for CO2 levels at all. What do you think, Steve?
I'm glad you mentioned Rosamond, because she was actually honoured in the New Year's Honours list, and she really deserved that honour.
Absolutely.
And I think we're at a very, very serious point. Look, I don't think, I mean, in all honesty, I don't think anyone can deny that the pace of climate change is accelerating.
Well, they can, actually.
And it feeds in particularly to the discussion we had earlier on about immigration. One of the reasons so many people from Mali, Mauritania, Niger, is because of the desertification, because the land is changing and people are coming forward. I think what we have to do is the Nana Akua rule here. Everybody thinks you want to do something, but what do you actually do? Now, most of my former constituents will be worried more about 8:30 than 2030, because that would be the issue for them here and now. And I think this is where politicians have actually missed it. It's no good expecting people to act out of the goodness of their heart. By and large, present company accepted, people don't act purely out of the goodness of their heart. You have to actually give them a financial incentive to be less polluting, or to actually incentivise against it. And I think what's happening in Canterbury and Oxford, we've got these small driving zones, it's a democratic attempt. If people don't like it, they can vote it. We had that in Ealing. We had low traffic neighbourhoods in Ealing, and people chose to keep them.
No, because all the parties have the same
I've got to go to the Great British.
Right, OK, so basically, when you have every political party that signed up to this net zero madness, you cannot vote out people that don't agree with it and vote other people in, because every single
party... You can vote out the traffic zone.
Well, not really.
No, every single party is absolutely backing this up. These people were not consulted. They were not consulted about... They were not consulted about the 15-minute zones, and we have not been consulted as a country about all of the net zero restrictions that are coming in the name of climate change. We haven't. 58% last year wanted a net zero referendum, 62% want one now. British people are not in agreement with this stuff at all.
Right, well, let's find out whether they are or not, because this show's nothing without you at home and your views. So let's welcome our great British voice. Let's go to Grimsby. Let's have a chat with Alan McNeely. Hey, Al, what do you think? This, are we at the tipping point? This is what The Guardian says. This is a little article in there talks about what is it, climate hell or something? I think
the highway to hell. Highway to climate hell.
Highway to climate hell, Al. What do you think?
Understated as ever.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
The whole concept gets lost in this idea that everything's dependent upon the CO2 levels. As I understand it, as the planet warms up, the CO2 levels will naturally increase anyway, so there's a natural link between the two. And we're all focused on the emissions, whereas, as Lois said rightly, it's that CO2 gets sucked in by the trees give out oxygen, we can all breathe. So in theory, we should be heading for a greener planet. The point and what tends to happen then is that the whole argument gets lost in, for instance, electric cars or something like that. There's been great deforestation across the world for many, many years, so planting lots of trees, great thing to do. We're supposed to have a scheme here, and the Queen backed one to plant a tree, and help the climate. But to me, the whole argument is just lost on one point and not broadened out enough, if that makes sense to you. I don't agree that we're on a highway to hell. I think that's absolutely nonsense. I just think it's total scaremongering. I think there's lots that we could do to help improve the planet and to help improve the environment, but I don't think it's a road to disaster that we're currently heading down.
Alan McNeely so succinctly said. Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you. Lovely to talk to you in the
Happy
New Year.
New Year, Nana.
Thank you, Al. See you soon.
Was Highway to Hell a Meatloaf song?
No, Chris Rea.
Oh, Chris.
That was a road tale.
I thought
Oh, it's the same thing.
Well, same thing. Isn't it?
driving home for Christmas. Was it?
It's a highway to
Driving
dystopia.
home to Christmas
that's
on the
what it
highway
is.
to hell.
Let's get on to soft rock.
Someone says AC/DC, I think it was.
Oh, respect.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I was a DJ.
What about a bit?
A DJ.
A DJ.
What about a bit of Steppenwolf?
No, I don't think I was alive then. Right, if you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV.
Self-esteem.